12. Julianne March. Passengers were so worried about a flight attendant's behavior during a United Express flight from Chicago to South Bend, Indiana, one day back in 2022, that they started to record the woman. The stewardess in question, 49-year-old Julianne March, seemed like she was drunk. Passenger Erin Sherb told the South Bend Tribune that she didn't make eye contact with any of the travelers as they got on the plane and seemed like she was leaning up against the galley. During the standard security announcement that typically happens at the start of every flight, her speech was incredibly slurred. March also repeatedly bumped into seats as she walked up and down the aisles to check that the overhead compartment bins were closed. Perhaps one of the most concerning moments of the flight happened when a passenger had to fasten the flight attendant's seatbelt after noticing that it wasn't on correctly. March then stayed in her seat the entire flight and seemed like she was passed out. After the plane landed safely in South Bend, a passenger voiced his concerns to one of the pilots. Two uniformed officers eventually came onto the plane, and as soon as March saw them, she started crying. When one of the officers asked her what city she thought she was in, she said Chicago. Her blood alcohol level tested at .204, 5 times the limit for airline employees. So she was charged with misdemeanor intoxication. A passenger later said that United offered him compensation when he called the company out for the incident in a tweet, but he felt the entire flight of passengers deserved to be reimbursed since everyone's safety was put at risk. He also said that he hoped the company didn't fire March, and that he wished they offered her whatever help she might need for her issues. 11. Oscar Mayorga. A concerned citizen in Eustis, Florida, called the police on the 4th of July back in 2022 after seeing a squad car from the nearby Apopka Police Department driving crazy and running stop signs. An officer from the Eustis Police Department then came out and pulled the vehicle over. The Apopka officer inside the vehicle, 25-year-old Oscar Mayorga, said that he was on his way to work and that he wasn't feeling well. He reportedly smelled very strongly of alcohol and had an open can of beer in the center console cup holder of the car. Mayorga initially claimed that he hadn't been drinking, instead blaming his seizure medication for the unusual behavior, according to a police report. He also allegedly told the officer who pulled him over that he took 3 Benadryl pills for his allergies, prompting the officer to ask him why he'd taken that much, knowing he had to go into work. After initially claiming that the beer can was from 3 days earlier, he eventually admitted to drinking 3 cans before beginning the drive to work that day. A photo taken at the scene showed the beverage in Mayorga's vehicle. With an alcohol content of 7.5%, the Florida-made IPA was a lot stronger than most beers. This helped explain why Mayorga's blood alcohol level tested at .391, almost 5 times the legal limit for driving. By the time he was put on a stretcher, Mayorga was becoming noticeably less coherent and wasn't able to answer the questions police were asking him. He was later charged with DUI and placed on administrative leave pending the results of an in-depth internal investigation. 10. Rebecca Conrad. In early 2022, 48-year-old United States postal worker Rebecca Conrad crashed her mail truck into the garage of a home in Chesterton, Indiana. She denied accusations that she'd drunk any alcohol that day, but responding officers found 7 empty bottles of banana-flavored schnapps inside her purse, and her blood alcohol level tested twice the legal limit for driving. Conrad eventually pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor operating while intoxicated charge and was given a 60-day suspended jail sentence for her actions, along with 5 days of community service. She also lost her driver's license for a month and was ordered to undergo a lengthy substance abuse evaluation. Just 5 months after dealing with her first OWI charge, a person called the police and reported seeing a postal worker fall out of a truck as it slowly veered off the road. A responding officer arrived and found Conrad lying in the road with multiple injuries. She allegedly claimed she had a seizure while driving, but the officer could smell alcohol on her breath and noticed her eyes were watery and bloodshot. Her blood alcohol level was .336 this time, over 4 times the legal limit. Conrad was charged with felony OWI with a prior conviction within 7 years. It doesn't seem like she learned her lesson the first time. 9. Peyton Michael Paddock. 24-year-old Peyton Michael Paddock was a special education teacher at a high school in Jefferson, Iowa, when fellow employees reported his abnormal behavior to the principal, Brian Phillips, one morning back in 2022. Police officers were called to the scene and gave the man a breathalyzer test, which revealed a blood alcohol level of .255, 3 times the legal limit for driving in many states. Surveillance footage also seemed to show Paddock staggering as he went into the school that day. He was charged with operating while intoxicated as well as public intoxication. He was also fired from his job. Paddock initially pleaded not guilty to the charges, but ultimately admitted to a first offense OWI charge. The judge gave him 180 days in jail, with all but 2 days suspended, along with 1 year of probation. He was also ordered to undergo a substance abuse evaluation and complete any recommended treatment afterwards. 8. Robin Comey. After the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, drinking on the job allegedly became such a huge problem among Connecticut lawmakers that House Speaker Matt Ritter publicly disapproved of the behavior. During a press briefing, he said that both he and House Majority Leader Jason Rojas had addressed the issue many times, warning lawmakers to stop drinking during legislative sessions, in the parking garage, and inside their personal offices. It's no secret that legislators in Connecticut and other places in the U.S. drink during lengthy debates and late nights. But it quickly got out of hand, according to Ritter, who warned that there would be significant consequences if the problem persisted. News of the excessive drinking started to surface in 2021, after State Representative Robin Comey struggled to speak coherently while discussing an early childhood education bill in the middle of a debate. She later issued an official apology, stating that a combination of anxiety, exhaustion, and drinking wine with her dinner that night affected her behavior. Comey said that she didn't drive home after the debate and insisted that the way she acted was completely out of character. This claim became questionable in early 2023 when the 55-year-old lawmaker flipped her car in Hartford after a meeting with colleagues at a bar. Security footage of the accident showed her sedan crashing into a dumpster and landing upside down in the middle of the street. Comey then crawled out from the vehicle and waited for police to get there and help. Body cam footage from the authorities showed Comey telling a responding officer that she didn't know how her car rolled over while she laughed nervously. She underwent several sobriety tests and performed poorly. In the video, she was seen stumbling over her own feet and was heard slurring her words. The officer asked Comey to take 9 steps in a straight line. After just 7 steps, she insisted she had finished the exercise. She was told to repeat the test, and once again, she stopped after only 7 steps. Comey was also unable to stand on one foot for more than a second and showed telltale signs of being drunk. Her eyes twitched during another sobriety test. She was unable to follow the officer's pen light without moving her head, and her blood alcohol level tested at .1446, above the legal limit for driving in Connecticut. She was soon taken into custody on suspicion of DWI. In keeping with his promise to discipline lawmakers for excessive drinking, Ritter removed Comey from her representative leadership roles. She released an apology and promised to get treatment for alcohol addiction. Her DWI case is still ongoing. 7. James Clifton. A federal officer who was working at the Buffalo Niagara International Airport in Buffalo, New York, started to get suspicious one morning when a JetBlue pilot failed to make proper eye contact or move out of the way for others at a security checkpoint. The officer told police, who went on board the pilot's aircraft right before it was scheduled to take off at 6 a.m. They asked Clifton to step onto the jet bridge for a moment, where they performed an eye movement test. He instantly failed and confessed that he drank the night before, according to a police report. The pilot initially said he had only 5 or 6 drinks, but then said he had 7 or 8. Police also wrote in the report that Clifton's speech and manner of walking showed signs that he was very impaired. His blood alcohol level test registered at 0.17, over 4 times the legal limit for pilots and twice the legal limit for driving. He was taken down to the police station, where he underwent additional questioning and was then returned to the airport so he could catch a quick flight home. Clifton's co-pilot told police officers that the two had gone out to dinner the night before, and that Clifton stayed behind at the restaurant when the co-pilot went back to his hotel room. After missing the airport shuttle the next morning, Clifton got an Uber to the airport. In accordance with JetBlue's strict zero alcohol policy, he was fired from his job, and the incident also sparked a Federal Aviation Authority investigation. 6. Jody Whitehead. After noticing a counselor acting strange one morning in 2021, a high school principal in Farmington, Arkansas called 911. He told officers that 43-year-old Jody Whitehead was stumbling and swaying when she walked in that day, and seemed to be leaning against a wall to keep her balance. When the officers asked the employees to bring Whitehead down to the office so they planned to speak with her, she reportedly needed help simply walking down a staircase. Whitehead allegedly became agitated when the cops started to explain why they pulled her aside to talk privately. They noticed that her eyes were glossy and bloodshot, and they smelled a distinct odor they suspected was alcohol, which grew stronger as the officers got closer to her. In addition to becoming frustrated easily, she was also demanding and slow to answer all questions. Staff members said it was nothing like her typical outgoing and talkative personality. According to a police report, Whitehead claimed she was on some medication that could be affecting her behavior. She refused to undergo a field sobriety test that day, told the officers to contact her husband with any questions they might have, and was uncooperative when she was arrested. Whitehead was assisted into a squad car and booked on a charge of public intoxication. She pleaded not guilty and later resigned from her job with the school. 5. Robert Morris Levy. In 2015 and 2016, VA administrators in Fayetteville, Arkansas, heard complaints suspecting that one of the agency's main doctors, Robert Morris Levy, was drunk on the job. He entered a treatment program after the second incident and came back to work several months later. Levy passed drug and alcohol tests, only for investigators to later discover he was taking a substance that enables a person to achieve a state of intoxication, but is not detectable in routine drug and alcohol testing. This drug is referred to as 2M2B. The substance isn't actually meant for human consumption. The doctor was let go from his position back in 2018 for continuing to come to work in an intoxicated state. An investigation into Levy's conduct revealed that 3 U.S. military veterans died from cancer while being treated under his care. In one case, he told a patient that nothing abnormal showed up in his biopsy, when in reality, he was suffering from prostate cancer. The 2 other patients were diagnosed and treated for the wrong type of cancer. Investigators also found evidence that Levy changed the patient's files to make it seem as if another doctor agreed with the diagnosis. In 2019, Levy was charged with 12 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of mail fraud, 4 counts of making false statements, and 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter. He ultimately took a plea deal and received 20 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. 4. Ryan Dixon. When it comes to hiring new workers, some candidates do a good job at weeding themselves out. Ryan Dixon happened to be one of those people. In 2016, he was hoping to land a job as a taxi driver with a Des Moines-based company called Trans Iowa. He drove to the interview drunk. Dispatcher Barbara Freeborn told local news station KCCI that Dixon pulled into the parking lot and crashed straight into two taxi drivers' vehicles, damaging both of them. Drunk or not, most people would be embarrassed enough to leave the scene. Or they would at least realize they weren't going to get the job and wouldn't bother with the interview. But Dixon still staggered his way into the building. When Freeborn asked how she could help him, he didn't seem to understand anything she said. Police were eventually called to the scene, and they tried to have Dixon perform a field sobriety test. He was allegedly too drunk to comply, and while it wasn't even 9:30 in the morning, a breathalyzer said his blood alcohol content was 0.273, 3 times the legal driving limit for Iowa. According to a police report, Dixon had been drinking until 2 o'clock in the morning the night before the interview. He went to the hospital because of his drinking, was released, and drank again at around 8 o'clock in the morning, right before the interview. Sadly, it sounds like Dixon may have struggled with alcoholism on a level that extends beyond standard recklessness. Hopefully, he got whatever help he needed because he definitely didn't get the job. 3. Donna Howard. In 2015, while working as a home health assistant in Staten Island, New York, 29-year-old Donna Howard was accused of stealing her 93-year-old client's credit card and using it to purchase alcohol at a bodega. She also allegedly drank the liquor on the job. The client, who reported Howard after realizing something was wrong, said that the suspect was assigned to her as a temporary aide, as a fill-in for her regular caretaker. She said she noticed Howard was acting kind of funny, but it wasn't until later on that she realized her aide was impaired. The elderly woman said that Howard acted over-familiar and shared too many details about her personal life. After borrowing $10 for food and leaving to go on lunch, the suspect returned with a can of Four Loko, which has both caffeine and alcohol, and is known for getting people drunk very fast. According to the victim, Howard most likely stole the credit card while she used the bathroom. When she came out, Howard was gone. That's when the woman remembered that Howard told her she put the change from the $10 she borrowed in the senior citizen's pocketbook. Suspecting that something wasn't right, the victim went through her belongings and realized her credit card was missing. She called her daughter, who came over and found the Four Loko in the fridge in a paper bag. Court documents say that Howard was captured on surveillance footage using the victim's credit card. When questioned, she admitted to being drunk and high on pills during her time at the victim's home, and to using the card. Authorities charged Howard with 4th-degree grand larceny, 4th and 5th-degree criminal possession of stolen property, and petty larceny. She refused to comment when contacted by news outlets, but a law enforcement source said that the suspect had been convicted of drunk driving and robbery back in 2002. She was granted youthful offender status back then, which meant the case was sealed, explaining why it didn't show up on a background check done by her employer, who clarified that the company has a thorough vetting process. A company spokesperson said that they suspended Howard immediately after learning of the allegations against her. 2. Tegan Leonhardt. One day in May 2022, a high school administrator in Marin County, California, went into a classroom. They quickly became concerned for a 46-year-old English teacher named Tegan Leonhardt. Believing that Leonhardt was either drunk or high, the administrator took her out of the classroom and called the police. Leonhardt initially denied the allegations, but an alcohol screening revealed that her blood alcohol content was over 3 times the legal limit. A drug recognition expert with the San Rafael Police Department said that she was also under the influence of marijuana and several prescription drugs. When confronted about the results, Leonhardt admitted to drinking that morning. Authorities charged her with public intoxication as well as child endangerment. She was released from jail after being booked and processed, and was placed on administrative leave from her job. At the time, Leonhardt had been teaching at the school for over a decade. A school spokesperson declined to comment, stating that that district doesn't discuss personal matters. 1. Nicholas Gifford. Back in 2022, when officers with the Jacksonville, Florida Sheriff's Office saw SWAT officer Nicholas Gifford's patrol car veering back and forth during a drive to the agency's gun range, they confronted their colleague. Gifford said he was drunk and confessed to drinking vodka before he went to sleep around 3:30 in the morning, just a few hours before his shift was scheduled to start. He also admitted to having a serious drinking problem and confessed that he had come to work drunk multiple times in the past. 3 hours later, he took a breathalyzer test and blew a .316, putting him in violation of the agency's zero-tolerance alcohol policy. Gifford was immediately fired from his job, but he appealed the decision through the city's Civil Service Board, which reviewed the matter and concluded that the decision to fire Gifford was manifestly unjust. The board voted in favor of reinstating him on the condition that he take occasional breathalyzer tests to prove that he's sober while working. Not everyone was happy about the decision. The sheriff's office had no control and had no choice but to obey the ruling. Civil Service Board Chair Jim Register told the First Coast News that he voted against reinstating Gifford. Knowing that the SWAT officer had gotten away with coming to work drunk in the past, Register had deep concerns about the decision to put him back behind the wheel of a squad car. But enough board members were swayed by Gifford's moving testimony, which included a promise not to risk his livelihood or put others in danger anymore. He said his life was unmanageable with alcohol and that he had been scared straight. Hopefully, he meant his words and will stick by them in the future.
Number 11. Itzel Ramirez. In 2021, a shocking video was released of an Amazon delivery woman from Castro Valley, California, viciously beating another woman after a heated exchange of words. The delivery woman was identified as 21-year-old Itzel Ramirez, but the name of the 67-year-old woman she assaulted was never released to the public. The older woman apparently called Itzel the B word after the pair got into an argument, and Itzel told her to watch her white privilege. The 67-year-old was angry that her package was delayed. It's not typically the driver's fault when a package gets delivered late. After all, they're only doing their job. But when Itzel told the woman to watch her privilege, she unleashed the B word. Once that insult was said, Itzel snapped. She was then caught on film beating the 67-year-old black and blue. This is all according to the video in the sheriff's office in Alameda County where the incident transpired. Doug Smith, the owner of the apartment complex in Castro Valley where the assault happened, gave local news the full scoop. Doug said that the victim received an alert that her package was finally delivered. However, when she went into the lobby to pick up the package, it wasn't there, but the Amazon driver was. Itzel Ramirez told the woman her package would be arriving very soon. But for some weird reason, it didn't come. Both the driver and the victim waited around for 15 minutes, but the woman's package never arrived. That was when everyone's tempers started to run short. There was a brief exchange between the two women, and then Itzel unleashed her fists of fury. She punched the older woman in the head and body, landing at least 10 solid blows. Itzel even had her up against the glass window, where she continued to punch the woman in the head. Itzel was later arrested and held in jail on a $100,000 bail, while her victim had to get treatment for her alleged broken nose and other injuries. Number 10. Ryan Muncie Graham. Ryan Muncie Graham was working as a delivery woman for Uber Eats in Haltom City, Texas, when she was knifed by a pair of teens in 2021. Ryan was simply trying to deliver some food to an apartment complex when she found herself surrounded by teenagers with deadly weapons. The teens attempted to rob her as she walked into the apartment complex on Northern Cross Boulevard, but the robbery went wrong. The teens, who were 14 years old at the time, attacked the innocent driver and then stabbed her to death. In March of 2023, justice was finally dealt. Although both teens played a role in Ryan's tragic death, only one was charged with murder. 17-year-old Zachariah Marshall accepted a plea to downgrade the charge of capital murder to ordinary murder, but he was still sentenced to 45 years in jail. He'll only be able to apply for parole after he serves at least 22 years. His accomplice already pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery in 2022 and received just 7 years in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. After the sentence was handed down, Zachariah Marshall apologized to Ryan's family for taking their daughter from them. At the time of her death, Ryan was working several jobs just to help support her family. In the courtroom, Ryan's stepmother said the night of January 27, 2021 was the worst of her life. Now she's looking after the children Ryan was forced to leave behind, and all because she was trying to make a better life for her family by delivering for Uber Eats. Number 9. Nathan Smith. After spending 18 months evading authorities, Nathan Smith was arrested and charged with murder in June of 2021. Nathan was responsible for the fatal stabbing of an Algerian delivery driver in London, England that took place on January 3, 2020. Takadina Budan was working for Uber Eats, delivering food through the city on a moped. He was in the middle of a delivery when he got into an altercation with Nathan, who was driving a white van. The disagreement soon spiraled out of control, and Nathan was quickly consumed with road rage. So he got out of his van and stabbed Boudin to death. But Nathan wasn't about to sit around and go to jail. According to detectives, he left the country immediately after. Nathan packed his things and arrived in Europe the very next day. He spent time traveling through Austria and Switzerland, just trying to stay on the move and stay out of jail. But then, after 18 months of his extended vacation across Europe, he made a grave error and flew back into London from Lisbon, Portugal. Nathan was arrested on the spot when he arrived at Heathrow International Airport. Following the initial murder, friends and associates of the victim called for better protection of delivery drivers in London. They said delivery drivers are often treated with less value than the food they're delivering. In another incident that took place in October of 2019, delivery driver Zachariah Garabi was punched so hard his eye detached from its socket. For the murder of Takadina Budan, Smith was jailed for life but received a minimum term of 21 years. He didn't have a very good defense either, considering the whole thing was caught on video. He was seen clear as day pulling out a knife and stabbing the innocent delivery driver out of pure malice. Now Nathan will likely never be released back into civilized society. Number 8. Chelsea Timmons. In 2021, during a brutal winter storm in Texas, a delivery driver was met with a rather unfortunate disaster. Chelsea Timmons was delivering groceries during the snowstorm that paralyzed the area. She was just outside Austin and was trying her best not to slide down the ice of her customer's driveway because the impact of the vehicle would have definitely smashed through their walls. Not knowing what else to do, Chelsea closed her eyes and prayed she wouldn't hit the house. And luckily she crashed into a flower bed instead. And while this could have proved extremely tragic, it turned out to be the right house for the occasion. Instead of being stuck in her car for the next 5 days while the snowstorm battered the state, Chelsea was welcomed into her customer's home out of the goodness of their hearts. These total strangers took in a random delivery driver for a full 5 days because she couldn't get her car out of the driveway. Homeowners Doug Condon and Nina Richardson tried to get Chelsea's Toyota RAV4 up the driveway and back into the road, but it just wouldn't go. Then, instead of making Chelsea sit outside in the freezing cold, they invited her inside to wait for a tow truck. What nobody realized was that it would take a while before a tow truck could assist Chelsea. The bad weather persisted for days. After almost a week, Chelsea was still living with the random couple. After all, she couldn't exactly walk all the way back to Houston. To make things stranger, it was Valentine's Day. Chelsea told the couple she could wait in her car, but they insisted she enjoy Valentine's dinner with them. Instead of turning into a human popsicle while waiting for a tow truck, Chelsea was served steak with blue cheese, broccoli, and salad. She was then offered a bed in the couple's home, where she slept for the next 5 nights. In the end, 5 days went by in a flash. Chelsea stayed in the spare bedroom. She enjoyed the couple's cute dogs, Crosby and Hattie, and nearly became part of the family. When the weather finally relaxed, Chelsea was able to drive safely home with the roads cleared and the sun shining. She'd even made some new friends throughout the ordeal. Number 7. Stuck nowhere. An Amazon delivery driver got so lost in California, they ended up in the middle of literal nowhere. The story of the driver turned up in November of 2020. They drove their Ford Transit van all the way down a 4x4 trail in the Golden State, all because the driver was following his GPS. We might not have even heard about this if it wasn't for the tow truck driver who pulled the van out of the muck it got stuck in. After the unusual job, Freddie Rodriguez from Cavalry Off-Road Recovery told the Drive all about the bizarre incident. The Amazon driver's GPS was supposedly broken and forced him down a dirt road used by people with 4x4s on the weekend. It's called Canyon Lake Trail and it's not far from Lake Elsinore. But the issue is that Amazon drivers aren't supposed to disobey the GPS, so the guy just kept going down the road until he wound up so deep in the mud there was nowhere for him to go. The Amazon driver's supervisor then phoned towing companies on Yelp for assistance, but 4 companies said no before he finally found Freddie Rodriguez, who agreed to drive down and pull out the stuck driver. However, instead of waiting to be pulled out of the muck, the driver phoned the police. He had the Riverside County Sheriff's Office deploy air rescue. By the time Freddie arrived to free the van from its sinkhole, the driver was already long gone. Number 6. Tanner Lynn Horner. Texas is seeking the death penalty for Tanner Lynn Horner, who was arrested and charged with capital murder in December of 2022. Not ordinary capital murder either, but capital murder for a person under 10 years of age. He's also been charged with aggravated kidnapping. And if it was up to the district attorneys in Texas, he'd spend the rest of his life on death row. It's not up for debate if Tanner is guilty or not. He already confessed to abducting and killing Athena Strand. The only thing still being debated is what his punishment will be. Tanner told detectives his version of events. He was working as a FedEx truck driver in 2022. On November 30th, Tanner accidentally hit 7-year-old Athena Strand with his vehicle. He told investigators that after he hit the child, he panicked and threw her in the trunk. Tanner was totally fine and hadn't been injured in the slightest from the accident. But he didn't want to get in trouble for accidentally hitting a kid, so he grabbed Athena and threw her in the back of his vehicle. Athena wasn't dead, she was just a little banged up from the accident. Tanner could have let her go, or he could have stopped and called an ambulance. But instead, he strangled her because she threatened to tell her dad that she was hit by a FedEx truck driver. And while this is what Tanner told the police officially, it's suspected he may have kidnapped Athena on purpose with the intention to carry out some kind of murderous fantasy. Athena was reported missing when she never returned home on November 30th. Her body was found about 10 miles, 16 kilometers from Paradise, Texas, 2 days later. Tanner was an obvious suspect because he was on the record delivering a package to the house at the exact same time Athena vanished. Tanner also had cameras on the vehicle that showed him kidnapping the girl. There wasn't any way he was going to cover it up, and now Tanner is facing the death penalty for the crime. Number 5. Bobby Jenkins. In early 2019, Bobby Jenkins was called to a vacant home in Philadelphia to deliver pizza, but when he got there, he was shot to death. According to the police, it was an orchestrated ambush. A group of criminals placed a pizza delivery call on purpose so that when the driver got there, they could steal his cash, his pizza, and his life. Bobby Jenkins was killed at about 7 p.m. on a Tuesday in late February. He was working for Stacy's Pizza and was delivering to the Overbrook Park neighborhood when the fatal events transpired. According to Captain Jason Smith of the local police, the crime was similar to something that happened just a few days prior. Jenkins was lured to the house by the criminals and was then shot in the chest and killed with a handgun. Afterward, the murderers fled the scene and were never arrested. Just a few days earlier, the same thing happened to a pizza delivery person 4 miles, 6.4 kilometers away. The callers used an abandoned home for the delivery location and had forced their way into the residence through the back door. And when the pizza arrived, they ambushed the driver. Jenkins was killed, but in the incident that happened prior, the driver got away with their life. Number 4. Jorge Dupre Lachazo. In August 2019, Jorge Dupre Lachazo delivered a washer and dryer from Best Buy to the home of 75-year-old Evelyn Smith Udell in Boca Raton, South Florida. The appliance delivery man then beat the woman to death and and set her on fire. It was an explosion of cruel violence. Dupre brought the washer and dryer with a second man, as it's a two-person job to carry such heavy pieces of equipment. But after the installation was over, the second man went outside. After a few minutes had passed, he heard screaming and ran back into the house. Once inside, he saw Evelyn lying on the floor and immediately called 911. As he was phoning the police, Dupre was hijacking the delivery van and driving off. Sadly, Evelyn was already gone by the time police arrived. When the authorities launched their investigation, they discovered a rubber mallet that had been used to bludgeon the old woman. They also found a can of paint thinner that Dupre used to set her on fire. When it came to a motive, the police figured Dupre wanted to rob the woman. They found that the victim's wallet had been disturbed, suggesting Dupre attempted a robbery but got busted before he could finish the job. There was no way he could have possibly gotten away with the crime though, since he was literally at the house with a co-worker. The police captured Dupre, and he's since been convicted of first-degree murder, arson and burglary. And although he was spared the death penalty, he did get life in prison. Number 3. Charles and the septic tank. It's not exactly clear where this story took place, but a delivery driver for Amazon found himself stuck in a septic tank in early 2023. He was simply identified as Charles, and he chronicled his journey into a disgusting pit of filth for everyone online to see. According to Charles's explanation in the gross videos he uploaded about the incident, it started with a hole in the ground. Charles was moving past a hole with a delivery in his hands that he planned to drop off at the customer's front door, but suddenly the ground went out from underneath him and he was falling. It turned out that he'd walked over the top of a very old and busted septic tank. Before he knew it, Charles was 6 feet 2 meters under. He had roots brushing up against his head and was thigh-deep in human feces. He tried to crawl out, only to have the dirt walls crumble in his eyes. He started to fear that the walls would cave in on him and that he'd end up entombed inside somebody's septic tank. The fire department did eventually come to rescue Charles, though. They showed up with a helicopter just in case, but only needed a ladder for him to climb out of the hole. The truly scary part about this whole ordeal, however, was that Charles was in a worse situation than he imagined. When the fire chief arrived and looked down in the hole, he told Charles not to move a muscle. The hole may have been deeper than it appeared, and if anything set it off, the whole thing might have collapsed. But luckily, Charles escaped with his life. Afterward, Charles took a shower and then went right back to finishing the rest of his deliveries. Number 2. To protect and serve. Anastasia Elsinger wasn't expecting a police escort to bring her lunch straight to her front door in January of 2022. Anastasia ordered some food using the DoorDash service, assuming her delivery driver would be some average Joe. But when there was a knock on her door, Anastasia found a Sioux Falls police officer standing there with her food bags. Their hilarious encounter was captured on her doorbell camera. But the reason the cop was there was less than comical. Anastasia didn't feel like cooking, so she ordered a wrap, some curly fries, and a drink from a nearby Arby's restaurant. When her food didn't show up, she checked her delivery app and saw that the driver was just sitting there a few blocks away, doing nothing. When she went outside and looked down the street, she noticed that her driver had been pulled over by the cops. Not wanting to interfere, Anastasia went inside to wait, thinking that her food would just be a bit late. But as it turned out, the delivery driver had an outstanding warrant. The police had no choice but to arrest the driver, but then there was the issue of Anastasia's food. Officer Sam Bird didn't feel like Anastasia deserved to suffer just because her delivery driver was a wanted criminal. So Officer Bird delivered Anastasia's food himself, even though it was a little cold when it arrived. In the end, everything turned out all right for everyone, except of course for the driver, who was taken to jail. Number 1. Angelo Ortiz. 6 years after the brutal slaying of Vanessa Marcotte, Angelo Ortiz pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In August 2016, Vanessa, who was an extremely successful Google employee living in New York, was visiting the home of her mother in Princeton, New Jersey. During her visit, she went out for a leisurely walk. You wouldn't think going for a stroll could be so dangerous, but Vanessa never returned home. Then on August 7th, just a day after she vanished, her body was found dumped in the woods about a mile, 1.6 kilometers from where she was last seen. Authorities say they found her stripped of her clothing and badly burned. She tested positive for gasoline, suggesting somebody tried to burn her corpse to get rid of the evidence. That somebody was later identified as delivery driver Angelo Colin Ortiz. Court documents proved that on the day Vanessa was slain, Angelo purchased $5 worth of gasoline just 6 miles, 9.6 kilometers, from where the body was found. But the journey from Vanessa's death to Angelo's arrest was a long one. He wasn't put behind bars until April 15, 2017. It took nearly a full year for the cops to find enough evidence to arrest Angelo. At the time of the killing, Angelo was 31 years old with a wife and 3 kids. He worked as a delivery driver for FedEx, primarily in the Princeton area. Police picked up his DNA from Vanessa's body when they conducted her autopsy. Then, by a complete fluke, a state trooper noticed a black SUV matching the description of the black SUV seen on the day of Vanessa's murder. The vehicle was traced back to Angelo, and his DNA was a direct match for the DNA found on Vanessa's corpse. Although it doesn't appear that any official motive has been given, it's generally agreed this was a spontaneous crime. Angelo saw Vanessa walking down the road and took the opportunity to commit a savage murder. He's now been sentenced to life in prison and will only be eligible for parole after serving 45 years. Number 12. Country club co-workers get violent. While working a wedding at the VIP country club in New Rochelle, New York in 2022, 3 employees got into a heated disagreement that turned terrifyingly violent. It's unclear what they were arguing about, but it appeared evident that 2 of the workers, brothers Samir and Almir Muratovich, sided with each other against the 3rd employee, 25-year-old Elijah Santiago. At some point, Santiago allegedly stabbed Samir in the abdomen, severing one of his arteries. Amir rushed over to his brother's aid, but he was subsequently stabbed in the back. Samir was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and according to this version of events, Santiago fled the scene and was quickly apprehended. He was charged with 2 counts of felony assault, along with a misdemeanor weapon charge. At his arraignment, his lawyers argued that their client was attacked by 4 men as he sat in a car, and that he defended himself with a camping knife. Santiago's mother, Lena Perez, told the local news site Talk of the Sound that her son complained about how the Muratovich brothers sat in their cars smoking weed while he did all the work during events. He reportedly said that the pair would rush over to grab up all the tips toward the end of the event and leave him with just $50, even if the tips totaled hundreds of dollars. According to Perez, the violent confrontation erupted after Santiago complained to his boss about Samir and Almir allegedly stealing tips. The defendant claims that the Muratovich and 2 of their friends approached him when he was sitting in his car during a break and tried pulling him out of the vehicle while another one of the men jumped on the hood. Perez said that her son has post-traumatic stress disorder from being badly injured in a gang-related stabbing, and that he panicked when he pulled the knife. But she said that he was also trying to fight off his attackers, who she accused of brutally beating him. She also denied that Santiago fled the scene, although the Muratovich's friends allegedly ran. Both Perez and Santiago's lawyers argued that he drove to another part of the property and parked beneath a security camera, where he dialed 911 and waited for police to arrive. Santiago requested a jury trial and planned to fight in court to clear his name, but ended up pleading guilty to 2 counts of felony assault as part of a plea deal, in exchange for a 2-year prison sentence, followed by 3 years of probation. Number 11. Valet versus Tommy Lee. Natasha Jefferson, better known as Tommy Lee, rose to stardom in 2012 when she landed a spot on VH1's Love and Hip Hop Atlanta reality series. Since then, she's become equally well known for her frequent run-ins with the law. In July of 2018, police reportedly spotted Lee blocking traffic outside an Atlanta nightclub at around 1:30 a.m. In an email to Bay News 9, Officer Lisa Bender said that she was asked repeatedly to move out of the road, but she refused and became belligerent. She struck a valet on the head and was booked into custody on a misdemeanor charge. However, she bonded out for $3,000. In a video of the arrest, Lee can be heard demanding to know what she did wrong as the cops handcuff her. She remained in the same state of denial after her visit to jail when she posted an Instagram video of herself depositing money into her bank account and making statements indicating that she saw herself as the victim of false allegations, negative comments, and haters in general. But by then, Lee had an established track record of reckless behavior. Just 2 months earlier, she was arrested for allegedly attacking a male employee. She'd also done jail time and went on to rack up more arrests and is currently serving 10 years of strict probation for an unrelated case. If she fails to take regular drug tests, abide by a curfew, remain in the state of Georgia unless she has permission to travel, and stay completely out of trouble, she risks possible jail time. Number 10. Lamborghini Joyride. When a valet working in Miami's South Beach took a customer's Lamborghini Aventador for a spin one day in 2015, it wouldn't be the first time someone in his job position got behind the wheel of an exotic sports car they've only ever driven in their dreams. But he failed to get away with it in the worst way when he revved the engine a little too hard, causing it to overheat and catch fire. Not something you want to do to a car valued at upwards of $400,000. Hilarious footage that appeared on social media shows the valet frantically trying to fan the flames before realizing his efforts were in vain. He dialed 911 while a man came by with a fire extinguisher and sprayed the vehicle. And if you've never seen someone use a fire extinguisher before, it makes a huge mess and can damage a car's paint job. In other words, even if the owner was thankful their car didn't become completely engulfed in flames, they were likely still pretty upset over the ordeal. The outcome of this situation is unclear, but it's safe to assume that the valet lost his job and made a serious enemy that day. Number 9. Irate cop loses control. One afternoon in May of 2022, officers in Delray Beach, Florida responded to a call about a really angry customer who was arguing with valet workers about where he parked his car. In the words of the 911 caller, the valets were unable to handle it. An internal affairs report later revealed that the angry customer was Robert Zychek, an off-duty corporal with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. The valet manager told responding officers that he'd placed a "lot full" sign over 2 parking spaces that he needed to prevent anyone from parking in. A worker soon noticed a vehicle parked in one of the spots and went over to tell the owner, who turned out to be Zychek, that he had to move his car. According to the valet employee, Zychek insisted on parking in the space even though he was repeatedly told that he wasn't allowed to because the valet needed the spaces for their use. Zychek allegedly became aggressive and shouted that he wasn't moving his effing car, at which point the worker was busy with other tasks. He told Zychek to either move the car or give the keys to a valet worker so they could move it for him. The worker accused Zychek of smelling like booze as he devolved into an unhinged rant that included threats to call the restaurant's owner, who he claimed to be friends with, and have the valet fired. The internal affairs report stated that Zychek repeatedly demanded the worker's name and even grabbed his shirt at one point. According to the employee, he told Zychek not to touch him, only to get punched in the chest with a closed fist. Zychek told investigators that the valet's version of events was untrue and that he parked in the space before the "Do Not Park" sign was there. He claimed that the valet ordered him to pay $50 or they would tow that S, and that he felt he was being charged an unfair amount because his friend only paid $20 to park. 3 witnesses gave statements corroborating the valet's story, but Zychek insisted they were all inaccurate. A deputy told investigators that he found the witnesses credible. Sadly, it took months for an investigation to even be launched, and the district attorney ultimately decided against filing charges, admitting in a letter that there was probable cause but claiming that there was insufficient evidence. The internal investigation, however, found that there was sufficient evidence to indicate that Zychek broke his employer's code of conduct and its rules and regulations for simple battery. In the end, he received an 8-hour suspension as punishment. Number 8. Valet pulls a vanishing act. During the first month of 2023, Scotland Yard received over 80 complaints about cars being stolen from a valet at Heathrow Airport in London. The baffled customers reported that they dropped their vehicle off with a third-party service that works out of the airport, only to have the car vanish under the company's care. To add insult to injury, some people paid as much as $178 £145 for the service. When customers tried to reach the company, they found that it had no website, and according to the Daily Mail, it's listed as dissolved in government records. One woman who booked her reservation through a third-party agency called EasyBook said that whenever she contacted customer service to try tracking down her car, she was given a different name for the company that was supposedly handling her booking. People were also unable to get through to the business on the phone. Luckily, investigators located around 70 of the stolen vehicles. Some were found in a field about 15 miles, 24 kilometers from the airport, while others were simply parked on the street. Police arrested a 25-year-old man on suspicion of theft, but released few other details because the investigation is ongoing. The suspect was freed pending the results of the findings, and according to the most recent update, detectives were still working to track down any remaining missing cars. A Heathrow Airport spokesperson urged the public to use one of its official valet operators and to thoroughly research any third-party booking company they're considering using. Number 7. Valet robs condo resident. A resident of the Bay Condominium luxury high-rise in Miami exited his apartment at around 1 a.m. one day in 2023 when he came face-to-face with two men who were exiting an elevator. The thieves, who police later identified as the building's valet attendant, 43-year-old Antoine Lefort-Louisant, and 26-year-old Philippe Valsi-Charles, forced the victim back into his apartment at gunpoint and ordered him to hand over all the jewelry he was wearing. They then zip-tied the victim's hands and feet and ransacked the apartment, according to a police report, which further stated that the suspects proceeded to pistol-whip the victim and demanded more valuables. He told the robbers he had nothing more to give them, and eventually they left. Surveillance footage reportedly captured the thieves arriving at the building in a BMW and gaining access with a key fob Louisant obtained through his job. He allegedly told police he was at home when the crime was committed and that his key fob to the apartment building was missing. In fact, he claimed that he didn't even realize it was missing until the building asked for it back. Cell phone data revealed numerous calls between the two suspects before and after the robbery, and also put them both at the scene. Louisant and Valsi-Charles are being held without bond on charges of armed robbery, kidnapping and burglary. The case is ongoing, so it's not clear at the moment what their punishments will be for their crimes. Number 6. Convicted felon poses as valet worker. A couple from Japan were vacationing in Hawaii on Thanksgiving 2022 when a thief posing as a valet worker stole their rental car outside their hotel. They just arrived at the property and were removing their luggage from the vehicle when the suspect approached and offered to park their car for them. Believing he was a hotel employee and unaware that the hotel doesn't have a valet parking service, they told him the key was in the car, and he drove the brown Chevy Malibu off into the sunset. Officers spotted the vehicle the next morning and saw the suspect, later identified as 22-year-old Jason Rolly Sabino, fleeing on foot. They followed him to the same hotel where the theft occurred and found him in the lobby. Sabino was charged with first-degree theft, unauthorized control of a stolen vehicle, and habitual property crime. During his initial court hearing, his public defender asked the judge to grant supervised release, but the judge denied the request and maintained Sabino's bail at $70,000, a decision that might have something to do with the fact that the defendant is a 10-time felon. If convicted as charged, he'll face mandatory prison time. Number 5. Sucker punched by a former cop. During an argument over an $18 parking charge that was captured on surveillance footage in 2017, an ex-cop sucker-punched a valet parking attendant at the Ocean Sky Hotel and Resort in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. John Kiernan, who formerly worked as a police officer in suburban Atlanta, knocked out Rodolfo Rodriguez with a single hit to the jaw. The incident was still under investigation when Kiernan reportedly told local station WTVJ that Rodriguez had threatened him. By then, the hotel's manager, Nigel Blair, was growing impatient and frustrated at what seemed like a lack of action by law enforcement. Kiernan was eventually charged with misdemeanor battery. In court, he testified that he felt threatened, but the video showed that Rodriguez's hands were in his pockets when he was blindsided by the sudden punch. The jury found Kiernan guilty, and the judge sentenced him to a year of probation along with anger management. During the sentencing hearing, Judge Robert F. Diaz described Kiernan's actions as cold and calculated and said that Rodriguez did nothing to deserve the attack. Number 4. Mortifying misstep. In early 2023, an Australian Instagrammer named Craig Jones posted a video that would make any supercar enthusiast die a little inside. The footage, captioned "They crashed our rentals," shows the aftermath of Valet crashing a bright blue ultra-rare Lamborghini Aventador LP784 Ultima Roadster into a purple coupe version of the same car outside a hotel in Perth. Shocked onlookers gathered as the valet sat nervously behind the wheel as the person filming the clip asked what he was doing. He said that he was just trying to park the car and that he accidentally stepped on the gas pedal instead of the brake because they were, in his words, too close together. It would have been bad enough if the valet had crashed any Aventador, but the Ultima, which made its debut in 2021, is the final and most coveted model. Valued at around $500,000, only 250 of the Roadster and 350 of the Coupe were produced. The good news is that neither of the cars in the video appeared to be totaled, although the blue Roadster had visible damage to the front end. The bad news is that the owner most likely took a massive insurance hit as a result. And the good news for anyone in Perth with a luxury sports car is that the valet was likely fired from his job. Number 3. Valet trio struck by crazed driver. 3 young men between the ages of 18 and 23 were just doing their jobs as valet attendants at a restaurant in Houston one night in 2021 when a white Infiniti came barreling straight at them at 60 miles per hour, 97 kilometers per hour. It all started when a cop spotted the Infiniti doing donuts in a parking lot and attempted to pull the car over. The driver sped off, and by the time the officer caught up with him, the horrific crash was over and the 3 valet workers were dead. After hitting the victims, the car sped into a ditch, flipped and hit a fixed object before finally coming to a stop. The driver, Ahmed El Tayeb El Numan Madao, and his passenger were each taken to the hospital with a broken leg. Investigators concluded that Madao was not intoxicated at the time of the crash. Apparently, he was just being completely reckless. In the words of the Harris County District Attorney's Chief of Vehicular Crimes, Sean Tier, one person decided they didn't want to get a ticket or potentially go to jail for a misdemeanor. As a result, 3 young people are needlessly dead, and another may very well have ruined his life. To the outrage of many, Madao was freed on $220,000 bail after being charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of aggravated assault. He was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet, but the news was less than comforting to anyone who thought he deserved to remain behind bars. Unfortunately, it's unclear where the case currently stands. Number 2. Porsche vanishes from valet. When Christian Sadala and his wife moved into an upscale Miami high-rise in 2022, they brought his father-in-law's custom-made Porsche 911 Carrera 4S with them. The couple were told that they had to pay a monthly fee to park the car with the building's valet service. Just 4 days after the couple moved in, the $180,000 vehicle disappeared from the garage. Sadala told NBC Miami that surveillance footage showed a man squatting behind an unattended valet desk with a parking box that had been broken for a while. According to an employee, he was then seen walking towards the Porsche, which was out of the camera's view, and then drove away in it a few minutes later. 3 months after the theft, police had charged 34-year-old Jesus Cepero with grand theft, but the car was still missing, and he unfortunately didn't have theft coverage on his insurance. The valet company said that they were cooperating with the police investigation, but declined to answer a reporter's questions about the unattended valet stand or whether it plans to replace Sadala's car. Valet services are supposed to keep people's vehicles safe, but this unfortunate experience should serve as a cautionary tale about how a car's security isn't guaranteed in a valet lot. Speaking with CNN, litigation attorney Charles Barron warned customers to check the fine print on tickets and signs for any clauses denying responsibility for property damage or theft, and said that it's a good idea to take photos of your car before handing it over to the valet. Number 1. News reporters bust sketchy valets. Jamie Sita was outraged when the valet parking service at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport charged her $30, even though its website advertised prices as low as $9 for a half hour or less. She took her concerns to the Fox 8i team of investigative reporters who looked into the issue and went to the airport with a camera rolling. In the footage, an undercover reporter could be heard pointing out the discrepancy between the prices listed on the website and what she was being charged to an employee who told her that parking is $30 for everyone and that the prices change. A member of the I-team contacted airport management and received a reply from spokesperson John Gorsmeyer, who confirmed that the price was $30 and that it had been raised several weeks earlier, but that the website hadn't been updated yet. He admitted that it was a shortcoming on the airport's behalf and explained that the valet section was downsized to allow more self-parking throughout the terminal. The good news is that the valet wasn't ripping off customers like it may have seemed, and the investigation brought enough awareness to the issue for the valet service to update its website. For Jamie Sita, having the accurate price information available was enough to remedy her complaint. She said she doesn't mind paying, but likes to plan for what she's going to spend. But anyone who's worked in customer service is likely imagining how some of the less patient customers who were upset about the price increase probably lashed out towards the valet workers. And anyone who's ever hit tough times may be thinking about how stressful it would be to pay $30 for something that you expected to be much cheaper. Luckily, these price discrepancies shouldn't happen anymore. Would you rather have to sue a valet company for refusing to cover over $1,000 worth of damages that they insist they're not responsible for, or find out that your ex put their utilities in your name and is months behind on the payments? Let us know in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.